So we're learning a little bit about what we call the Niagara framework. Okay? The Niagara framework has come out of a bunch of some guys that were control guys. Their company got bought by somebody and they decided they didn't like it, so they went out and tried to build a program that will try to normalize multiple different vendors into one front end. Okay? And they called it the Niagara framework. We've had 3 major revisions of this Niagara framework. Some of you have worked with R2, which was the first version of the Niagara framework that came out. And the whole idea about the Niagara framework is it's supposed to take dissimilar objects, like a power meter, a VFD, a VAV, some Modbus device, and be able to pull all of those different protocols into one box and normalize everything to look like 4 objects. Okay? So we could take anybody's stuff, use a special driver, and pull it into that one JACE and normalize everything so you can just have 4 types of objects that you have to work with.
Correct.
Yeah. It's a little bit of voodoo, right? So the device that we're tying to, right, is what we call a JACE. Inside that JACE, it's running different versions of the Niagara framework. Okay, so the first version was R2. And then we came out with a version called AX. And the current version right now is called N4. Okay? So R2 to AX was a complete rebuild. They built R2, figured it out, and then they decided, oh, we've learned a whole bunch of stuff, we want to start over, and then they built AX.
And they started over with N4.
N4, they kept 90% of AX and moved to trying to change how you viewed the information and added more security. Okay? These 2 use Java to make the graphic pages and everything function. N4 is trying to use what's called HTML5. Which is the new Internet Protocol standard of programming and doing graphics. Okay? The reason they went to this, because some fancy programmer decided to poke holes in Java that had security flaws. And so instead of trying to just keep patching it, they've moved to the next technology. So that's why that one's done that way. They've added more security to this. Try to give it more
I
functionality.
knew Brooks Q was up to something. You can't trust those programmers.
Yep,
Not
they always have to
Closed door
stick their
meeting,
fingers. Come on in. All right. So the JACE itself is our little engine running this Niagara framework. Most of the JACEs that you have in campus are still running the AX version of the software. We've added a supervisor, right? So this is sitting on a computer somewhere, and he's now serving up all your web pages and graphics. So we're importing information from this into the N4 supervisor. Okay?
So how come the N4 supervisor keeps going down?
I have no idea. Is it stopping, or they're having to reboot it?
I don't know, it'll just go down, we don't have anything for a while, and then like yesterday, it just magically come back up.
I haven't heard about that, so we'll have to look, see what it is.
Well,
Has it been rebooted yesterday or anything like that?
no, there was an issue last week where there's a Windows kernel update, and it took the server down. But yesterday, it just lost communication for 10 minutes tops.
Okay. Could be a network thing. So currently, there's, I think most of the Jaces that you guys have are Jace 600s. You may have a couple of Jace 700s. The new style that's out is the Jace 8000. Okay? So this one has more memory, more processor power to be able to run the N4 software. You can only go to a certain version of N4 in these Jaces, if you guys ever go that route, because they don't have enough horsepower to handle all the new stuff and things in there, okay? So this Jace then, he's trying to be that master integrator, right? He's trying to bring all kinds of different disparity things inside. So on campus, we have lots of different things that we're talking to, right? You got Modbus devices. You got Smart 2 devices. You got LAN. You got BACnet. Do we have another one?
No.
Those are the main ones, right?
Yep.
There are other drivers like the Johnson driver or Honeywell C-Bus driver or some other special thing. There's a whole list of different drivers.
There's an OBIX. and
We do have
know
OBIX.
Nothing about OBIX.
The OBIX driver is used to talk from AX back to an R2 Jace.
That's what that does.
Okay? Cool. We've learned one thing. I'm done.
We've been successful.
Okay? So again, these are all different protocols or languages, right? And what we have inside the Jace is we have drivers that match each one of those. Okay? So I have a Modbus driver, a Smart 2 driver, a LAN driver, a BACnet driver, an OBIX driver. Okay? So all of these things have different kinds of points, right? So what type, I said there's 4 point types that we use. Who can tell me one of those? So BACnet is a driver. I want to go farther down.
You thought binary or
So like a binary point. So
Analog.
analogs. So the name in Niagara framework is a numeric, right? So these are numbers.
string?
Okay, we've got a string. I'll get to that one. So what kind of things or numbers do we look at?
Temperature? Pressure?
Pressure. Velocity.
So that's what fits into the numeric side, right? Then we have Boolean. And what?
That's on-off stuff.
Right, and I can't spell probably. So we got on, off, right?
Occupied, unoccupied.
So awk, unawk, true, false, open, closed, alarm, normal. Lots of different things for Boolean, right? Then there's another one that's called enum. What's an enum object?
Anything that has more than 2 states, like occupied, unoccupied you got there, but if it's got a warm-up mode or cool down mode,
So it's
Or
a variable
high,
like
medium, low.
Matt says it has multiple states, so they're like integers, right? So 0 might be occupied, 1 might be unoccupied, 2 might be standby, 3 might be purge, 4 might be
Warm up.
warm. So bunch of bunch of different state or functions of that particular block. Then the other one that he talked about was string. Right? It's not silly string, it's just text. Okay? So words, right?
Sometimes those are silly.
So different words that we can use. Okay? So the Niagara framework is trying to take all of these different drivers that it can communicate with, pull in their properties into our database, and align them with one of these 4 building blocks. Okay? So when you look inside the JACE, when we pull up the software, you'll see there'll be a drivers section, and underneath drivers you're going to have your networks. And maybe we have a Niagara network. What kind of things would be under your Niagara network?
It does the transferring from other JACEs.
So this driver for Niagara networks allows me to communicate to multiple JACEs.
So outdoor air temperature for whole campus.
So we can share what data is inside that JACE to another one. Or from a JACE to JACE, or going JACE to our supervisor, the N4 supervisor, right? Excuse me. So another network might be our Smart 2 guy, right? And then underneath our Smart 2, we might have a list of devices that's underneath there. And underneath our devices, we'll have a points folder. And this points folder is where we're pulling the things from the physical Smart 2 controller into the JACE and normalizing it with one of those properties. Okay? So our zone temperature for the Smart 2 guy is going to come in as a numeric for that numeric object. Occupied, unoccupied modes from a Smart 2 will probably come in as a numeric. It has multiple states. Fan start stop will come in as a Boolean point. Okay. So we can have another one, right? We have a Modbus driver. We'll have a device underneath that, and then we'll have more points. So,
Do we have any Modbus on campus besides energy monitors?
there should be. There's usually some like some VFDs or chillers can talk Modbus. Modbus is a pretty peripheral. There's a lot of things that talk Modbus. Okay, so pull in those kind of things.
Just I don't know.
Okay. So a couple of differences. When we were buying AX devices or JACEs to do AX, we bought a driver to put in that JACE. So if I needed to do Modbus on an AX box, I'd buy a Modbus driver. If I needed to do LAN, I'd buy a LAN driver. And then I could hook up whatever devices that this could handle underneath it. Okay? When they moved to the N4 software, they decided that they would give you specific drivers up front, and then you would buy a capacity for that JACE. Because all they're doing is, instead of selling multiple JACEs with capacities, they're just selling one JACE that has lots of memory, lots of power, but they're limiting what it can do based on what you buy for it. Does that make sense? So if you bought a Jace 8100, it would mean it could handle 100 devices. And what's a device? A VAV, right? A VFD, a chiller.
So are they limiting that based upon points?
So there's a next piece to that, right? Each device can have 50 points pulled in. If you go above 50, it's a second device.
So is 8100 a big one?
You can buy I think it's a 5, 10, 25, 100, or 200.
So I've seen some Atkinson Logic pages with more than dozens of points.
No, the logic page stuff doesn't count.
Is it
It's
just
only
physical
things that are physical underneath the device.
inputs and outputs? Okay.
Okay, let's pay attention to that part.
Okay.
Everything else is just fluff and memory. It's really the input-output devices.
Okay.
So it's a physical, so like when we talked about last class, when we landed a wire onto that controller, that's one device. And then underneath it in the database, it'll have a points folder, and as you pull in those points, that's what counts against your 50-point limit.
So is it possible to put a router under it so that it can bring in more points than it exceeds? I mean, if you get it to the software state, it doesn't count anymore.
Well, if you put another device underneath, like if you did a backnet device, and you were talking to other things, if you're pulling those points up into the Jace, they'll count as I/O points, because it's still connected to a controller.
You were saying the software doesn't work, so I'm just asking if there's.
If you,
So would those then be software points or real?
Or physical points.
when we pull up the workbench, he'll show you the difference. Which ones count, which ones don't. Okay? All right?
Who's gaming the system, man?
Except for the paycheck, I couldn't figure out how to do that one.
No.
You're talking about the sacred resources.
So the N4 supervisor, you buy him by how many Jaces are you connecting to him? Right, he's licensed by Niagara Connections. Or you can actually add device capacities to him so that he could have a driver and a network underneath the supervisor. And you can add more devices in for that as well, to pull in points and do that kind of stuff. Okay. Is that what I had last time? Okay.
Just put down the screen.
All right, so when you're connecting to a Jace, what do you need to talk to it? How do you get connected to a Jace?
Review of last one.
Ethernet, workstation, or server?
Right.
They're not wireless. Orange wire. They're just not wireless yet.
So you have to either use your web browser, right, to connect to it, or you could use what's called Workbench, right? That is a piece of software on your machine that will allow you to connect and talk to that box. Okay? And then how do we secure it? So what else is required to connect to the box? Once I've got it, I know its IP address, how do I connect?
You gotta know the passwords.
So we have users,
Log in.
login, and stuff like that. That's what I forgot to put on that other slide. So if I disconnect here, and I go back to here,
Host.
I think that one crashed for me.
first, isn't it? It's never ever crashed.
So when you double click on your station, so you either have a list of them in your tree using the software, or in your browser, right, you'll have the IP address, or you can use the name that's been populated in your network. So there's a server on your network that knows all these names. So if I type in n4.byu.edu, it resolves it back to that IP address that we have. Okay, so I have to have a username and a password to get in. Thinking about it. Okay. So on this front page, it gives me some details about the supervisor, tells me what version of the software that it's running, its current time, which seems to be right today, and then its IP address. Okay. So once I connect, most of the supervisor has what's called a home or a navigation page. So this is just a graphic that Matt or whoever's made that has little jump tags on it to send me around where I need to go. Okay? Try to make it easy for you, right? So then if we tunnel in a little bit, when I drew on the board, right, we had a drivers folder. So underneath the drivers on this supervisor, it looks like we have 4 different networks that are being used right now. So we have a BACnet network, we have a Niagara network, an OBIX network, and an RDBMS network. RBMDS is it's really a database network. It's connecting to your MySQL database. Okay. The OBIX guy, that's the one connecting to old R2 JACEs. And our Niagara network is what we're connecting to all the other JACEs in the building. So underneath that network, they've created a folder structure. So I've got a folder that has different JACEs inside of it. So for ASB, we've got 4 JACEs that have been pulled into this supervisor for us to pull points from. Okay? Same kind of thing. And on the BACnet network, it looks like we've pulled in a couple of the BACnet buildings and the devices from that particular building as well. Okay? So if we look at ASB and I just double click on that folder, because the folder has that cute little square on it, it's telling me that it's going to be a Niagara network device folder. So it lists here the 4 devices that are inside that building that we're pulling data from. So this gives me its name, gives me the IP address of the different boxes, tells me what version of software that it's running, and that we're connected and it has good health. It looks like it's still functioning. So this tells me what kind of JACE is there. So the JVLN is the JACE 700. And NPM3 is a JACE 300. We didn't really put that on the list. They're small. There's also a JACE 200 and the JACE 6. So you might see any of those 3 that are in there. So underneath one of these controllers, I really talked about the points folder, but there's more functions and things under here, but for the most part you'll be in points and possibly histories would be the area that you would be working with. So if I open up the points folder, it lists some folder structures that represent what's actually in the JACE that we're pulling all this from. Okay? So we have a driver on that JACE that's called Trunk 1, or a Smart 2 driver, and we have a folder in there that's doing Trunk 1, Trunk 2, Trunk 3. And we can go connect and look at those. They're using the AX version of software, so I'll have to switch and go to that one. So we opened ASB. Tunnel down inside, it looks just like N4, right? We've got a config folder, we've got a drivers folder. Here's these trunks are the Smart 2 drivers networks. So I've got a trunk 1 and trunk 2. And if I double click on that trunk, it'll open up and give me the device list of all those controllers. It's got pretty colors on it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? A bad thing, right?
If it's yellow, it's mellow.
So yellow tells us that he's not responding back to any requests, right? So it's not, the Jace can't find that device, okay? If I right click on that device and I go to his properties page and I open up the help thing already, it says that the last time this card talked to the Jace was April 25th of 2019.
It's pretty recent.
So he's been offline for a little while. Okay? Sometimes you'll see other colors in these folders. If I go to trunk 1, we've got some gray looking ones. What does the gray mean?
Removed one there.
So they may have been taken out of the system as far as physically not there, and somebody's just disabled them in the software to say, don't go ask for this anymore.
So it's not an actual indication that it's been removed, just that somebody disabled it on the software.
Correct. Very good. So it just means gray means it's been disabled, doesn't mean it's gone. It might be gone, but we don't know.
The yellows might be gone, and that's why they're not talking.
Yellows could be gone. So, for example, this guy up here, right? Oh, we just got a new yellow one right here. If I right click on that guy and I do an action ping, he responded back. So I know that guy exists. We're having some communication issues on this wire that when the Jace asks, are you still there? So about every 5 minutes, the Jace kind of says, are you there? And waits for a response. If it gets a response, it'll leave it white. If it doesn't get a response, it'll mark it yellow. And then in 5 minutes, he'll try it again. Have you ever seen kind of an orangey color guy in here? So the orangey guy means that he requested, are you there? He got a response back, and it didn't match what he thought it was going to be. So it got garbled somehow. So it might have said, hey, are you a BAV? And he responded back, nope, I'm a DDC card. And so it'll mark it orange. Or if it gets garbled information back, he didn't understand it, he'll mark it orange. When he marks it orange, he doesn't ask it for anything again. Because he says, I've got the wrong controller or it didn't respond right. I don't know what I should do. So you usually have to right-click ping the orange ones to get it to re-query and then come back. Okay? So if we switch back to the supervisor, and I went and opened up one of these guys. That's not a good one. Where'd the one that was on? Was it D2? One that was, yes, this one. Which one was down?
Oh, it's DO2 was down.
So the gray kind of things are kind of stale, right? It's kind of a slightly weird yellow for some reason, but maybe it's my computer. So these are kind of a down view again. Some of these don't go colored. That's part of a thing on the graphic. Right, maybe we didn't enable the color to pass through. So if we double click on the point, the color effect is what happens to pass it through. So that one's not using the color effect. If I go to this one, you'll see it says color. So some graphics, if you haven't enabled the color effect, you won't see those little features. What's the purple stand for, do you remember?
Manual.
Well, somebody's overridden that one, so that's what purple stands for. It kind of passes that through. Okay?
In the red?
Red is usually an alarm, but in this instance, I think somebody just used a blue background and a red background. That's not actually doing anything. So if we peeked on the graphic, you'll see up here background blue and no color effect. Okay? So as long as I'm not moving anything or dragging anything around, every time I click this edit button, it does open it. If you move something and you hit the edit button, it'll save whatever you did. Okay? The only way not to save, if you made a change here, is to go someplace else. Just click and move, and then it won't save any of the stuff that you've modified. But if you push this button, it thinks you're just going to save what you did. So be careful. Okay? All right. So underneath this guy, there's a points folder. Now this is on the supervisor. So these folders have been made to represent the path to where things are sitting in the actual JACE itself. So we know we have a trunk 2 network. We have a VAV 4A001. We've got a little tech switch folder, we got a points folder, and then under the points folder there's an application folder and a set points folder. So when we do these, somebody's done the discovery and gone out and decided what points we wanted to pull in from that panel to sit in that particular folder. So they've had to come in here and search down through the database and go to the controller that they wanted to look at. Win A1, yeah. And then when I hit OK, it finds all the properties that are inside that device. And then I can take those properties and add them to my supervisor station and then use those for graphics and things like that. Okay? So let's look at the JACE itself a little bit more. So this guy's coming in and out just because we've got some noisy trunks. If I tunnel down into a controller and I look at what's called the wire sheet, so if I go view wire sheet, it'll show me these little things that are underneath that guy, right? So I've got an object in here. It says alarm source, a points folder, this little text switch folder, and then I've got this little error program that's running in here. So this has a bunch of links on it, right? The little knobs on the side. That's telling you it's got data coming from someplace else in the station and linking up to that program block. Okay? So our palette here gives us different types of objects that we can use to build logic inside our JACE folders, right? So we use a lot of math functions, right? We want to add, we want to divide. It's also got geometric functions. You could write some fun formulas. We can look for maximum, minimum. We can multiply something. We can do exponential powers. We can do a sine wave, square root. So they have all the functions for math that you might need to calculate something with, right? for the most part in this group, you'll probably only see add, divide, multiply, and subtract as objects. If we move up, there's the logic folder. So, everybody know what an AND block is? So I grab it from the palette, I can drop it on a page, and it'll insert that object for me, right? I pull an OR block over here. Okay. So I'm trying to link up some logic, do something with it. So let's say I just insert one of our Boolean guys, and we'll say this one's our free stat. I'll just kind of stick that up here inside the database. And let's say we've got another Boolean point. That's our fan, start, stop. Okay. Now these points don't count against my count because they're not physical points in the device. They're just objects that I'm using. Okay. So how does an AND work? So to link these together, I can go from the out and drag it down and put it on an in. Take this one to the other end. I can drag this one. Okay. So one of the nice features is when you highlight a block, it shows you the links where they're going. So you can kind of see what's connected when the lines get a little crisscrossy. If I click on this one, it sees where it came from. Okay. So what does an AND block do? What's it?
Gets a true output if both inputs are true.
Okay, so it's asking that both things coming in match and are true to send out a true. Okay? So if I told the free stat that he's active, I don't know what that means, or true, right? And then I tell the fan that he's on, or true, then I get a true out up here, right? So that's where we get that AND, right? If I turn off one of them, what does null mean?
Means he doesn't want to have an opinion.
So no means kind of no number. I'm not sending you anything. I'm kind of releasing you away.
Null is, it will accept the absence of a number. NaN is not a number. So null is what you set it to when it's okay if it's not going to be used.
Right.
No opinion.
So because this is an AND block, and I'm not sending it a value, I'm like releasing it to whatever it wants to be, this went true. Okay. So if I actually set it to be one or the other, so let's say we set it to be false as its default value instead of that null, then it starts doing what it's supposed to, right? So the AND needs both inputs to be true to give us a true. The OR just needs one of the inputs to be true to give us an output. Okay? So you're going to see a lot of this stuff. So if the free stat's in alarm and I turn on the fan, I don't want it to run, right? So that would be an instance where I would need this AND to do my fan. So let's say, for example, we'll just add fan. So I could link this up and send that over to my fan to tell him to run. Okay? So true on a free stat doesn't really tell me anything. Is it an alarm? Is it good? Is it bad? It needs a little more better description, right? So the building blocks have the ability to call a facet to adjust what that label actually means. So in my instance, true, I want that to be normal. Can't spell. And then false, I want that to be alarm. Or alarm freeze. Right? So now, if we go back and look at the points, right, true or normal is giving us a normal command, and then our fan start stop says true or false still. So we could change that also to be on and off if we wanted to, right? So true to be on. On and off. Alright. So now we're telling the fan to be off. The freeze stat's normal, so the fan's not running. If we got a command to tell the fan to run, right? You guys are all familiar with the override command limit kind of a guy, right? So if you don't have to go back and remember to turn it back off, right? You can come in here and say, I don't want it to be a permanent thing. I just want it to run for a minute, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 to 3 hours, or you can do custom and put in exactly what you want it to do. 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Okay? So I told him to go on. We now have a true case. The fan's coming on. Everything seems to be running fine. We get our little freeze stat guy. He trips and goes into alarm. Did I do that wrong? There he goes. So now we got a freeze alarm because we're telling it to run based on the start stop. Freeze not good anymore. So now it kills the fan and shuts us down. So we're taking these logic blocks to link all this stuff together, to tell it to do a function and do something, right? So you're going to see ands and ors and different blocks. There's one in here called a HVAC. It's called a T-stat. What do you think a T-stat is?
Thermostat.
So it kind of represents a thermostat. So how does a thermostat work?
Analog.
Say that again?
Analog.
So it's watching a number, right?
Binary output, but it's a threshold.
So it's working as a threshold block. We're watching for the number to get above something or below something to do a function, right? So if we go inside the properties of this little thermostat guy, CV stands for current value, SP stands for set point, and diff means the differential around that set point. So if I say I want a set point of 50, and I want a 20 differential around that particular guy, and I want this to say false.
Differential is the same thing as deadband.
It's kind of the deadband guy on it, right? So I have this little block that I've kind of set up. If I'm just playing around, right, I've been copying this stuff and pasting it in this BAV A001. Have I broke anything yet? Not yet. I could, but I'm not. So what I want to do is, instead of playing under AV401, let's say I want to put all this in just a folder for me to play with. So I'm going to right click and do cut on the stuff that I put in here. And then I'm going to go up here to drivers. And I'm going to tell it I want a new folder. And I'm just going to put this in here down at the bottom. So now I've got a little folder. I can just kind of paste my stuff in here. And now it's all organized in a spot I can play with and just do some stuff with. I'm not affecting anything. I'm just putting some blocks in here to play with. Okay. So I need a number or something to make this work, right? So there's this thing under utilities that's called a sine wave. So I can drag this little sine wave over into my station and he'll start calculating a number for me. If I look inside, he's got an amplitude of 50, so he'll go up and down 50 on either side, and he has an offset of 50, so we should be able to see a number between 0 and 100 as it's trying to do its little thing here. Okay, so if I link this up, hey, there's no in on here.
Oh.
How am I supposed to hook that up?
White line.
There's stuff inside there, it's just not pinned out is what we call it. So if I click on the white line here and let go, it'll pop up the little link, the link helper. You'll notice my out is still red because I drug it from the out to this white bar. So he's already highlighted for me. And then it gives me the ones that I can link to. So I want to hook this to the CV or the current value. And when I hit OK, it creates that link. And now my little T-stat block is doing his little thing. So when's he supposed to turn off?
15
When it
for
gets
deadband
below
and 20.
deadband,
So when he gets below 40,
40.
because we had a set point of 50, and I put 20 in there for the deadband, so I got 10 above and 10 below. So once this gets back up to 60, boink, he's going to turn back on and go true. Okay? So I can use this to kind of simulate some numbers for me if I wanted to. What if I wanted to actually look, so let's say that this is a, we want this fan to only come on when we're above 50 degrees in the room. Otherwise we don't want the fan to turn on.
Link it into the start stop,
Okay?
safety stores.
Alright, so let's use some real, so if I take this guy and I drag him up here, again I don't have any more inputs on here that I can see, but if I go to the white bar and let go, hey, there's 2 more hidden inputs inside there. So I can pick input number C. So now the room has to be above 50 or 60 to get this to turn on, and then cause the fan to run, so all my stuff turned off.
So your Boolean fan start stop is like a safety interlock.
Kind of, yeah. So now I've got my free stents normal, my fan command is enabled or able to run, and now we're watching kind of a room temperature. So once the room temperature gets above 50, all of these went true, which turned on my fan. Once the temperature comes back down, it'll turn back off my fan. Okay? Does anybody know what a not block does up here in the logic guys? You got a little knot here.
Square knot.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Kind of like a square knot, yep.
It reverses your true false.
So if you take an output and feed it into the in, it'll do the opposite. So it'll knot. It's kind of a logic programming thing, right? We're going to make the thing invert. So there's occasions when you want a command that's false to send out a true to something else, right? So for example, if you have an alarm on your fan status, if you're not commanding the fan on, then you want the inhibit to tell it not to do that alarm. So it goes true to inhibit the alarm. But when I turn the fan on, I want it to not inhibit, so I want it to go false. So sometimes you have to do a little invert on your logic of what you're linking it to. Okay? So let's say I want to link the temperature of that room we were looking at in here, not my little sine generator. So I can highlight the link, use the scissors and break it, cut it off. Then I can come in here and go to the trunk, go to the VAV that I was looking at. Oops, I clicked the button. I found my zone temp. I want to link that to this particular guy. So it requires a couple of things to do that. One is I right click on that point because it's on a different page, right? I don't know where it's at. And I say I want to mark you. So I'm marking this temp sensor in my device. And then I'm going to right click on where I want it to go. So we're linking from the zone temperature and we want to link it into our stats. So we're going to do link from. So here's our out from our temperature, and we're going to link it into the current value. And so now I got a little nub on the end, and now I'm reading the temperature from that VAV, pulling that into my logic, and allowing that to control this little piece of logic. Okay? So if we went to this little text switch block, on your floor plan, usually you have a little object at the top that says you want to see the temperature, room number, cooling calculation, heating calc. What you're doing is you're changing this little selector input number to look at different spots inside this string selector. So we're linking in a temperature. The error doesn't have a link on it, the flow doesn't have a link on it, but we have cooling calc and we have a heating calc. So these three are the ones that have valid stuff, plus the floor name for that particular guy. Okay? So when you're clicking on this particular point on the graphic, down at the bottom, this little bar piece here, when you put your mouse on a point, it tells you where that's coming from inside the station. So that link called text switch out is right underneath the drivers. So if we went up here, close this up, there's that little text switch object that we're playing with right here. So if I right click on it and go to set, currently it's on zone temp, so we're seeing the zone temp come out. If I change it to cooling calc, it'll say cooling, and then it will look at what the cooling link is right here. It says it's putting out 0. Can't quite see it. So here's our 0 number. If I click on that text switch again, set it to heating, right, we're gonna get our 100 coming out. All of this is attached to the floor plan that you were looking at on the beginning page. So let's put this back to zone temp. Switch back to N4 because that's where our stuff is, right? And we go home, ASB, here's our floor plans. If I click on a particular floor, yeah, this one doesn't have it enabled for us.
That's the D wing, we were on A002, I think.
Actually, before I leave that, what do these little question marks mean?
It's not good.
No bueno.
So no handshaky, right? It doesn't show a yellow, right, but we know it's not communicating. That's an indicator that it's not talking to us. If I clicked on that point, went to the
Don't we see
VAD.
those if it's just that the stat is not giving it a temperature? In this case, it's looking for temperature.
In this particular one, if it's got a question mark, it doesn't have any kind of number coming in. If the stat was just missing, it would normally be like a 32 or a 99, depending on what controller it might be looking at. So this one doesn't seem to be giving us any data at all, but it doesn't show that it's yellow or anything, so we're not sure if we're really seeing good stuff or not. Okay? Looks like we got two that's still not communicating, the rest look like they're doing their thing. Okay. So, to kind of see where this is coming from, a little edit tab again, you double click on it. This board right here gives you the path to where it went to find the information. So again, it's under drivers, under Niagara Network, under ASB, ASB2, points, trunk 2, BAB4, AO3. It's looking inside that tech switch folder and grabbing the string select, and that was the thing we were playing with, changing it, what it was showing us. Okay. So these objects or Boolean points don't count against our point count, but when you tunnel into a device and you go into his points folder, anything you bring in under the points folder that's from the device itself are counted as points against you. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 16 points in that folder, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. '24, 25. So you have 25 points being used by that VAD card. So you're under the 50-point limit, so it's just being a device. So the whole idea about the Jace is he's a normalizer to pull in multiple protocols and make it fit into 3 categories, or 4, right? Boolean, numeric, enum, or a string object. And that's the whole purpose of the Jace, is to be able to normalize it. So if I'm looking at a graphic, I don't know whether it's a VAB Smart 2 card, a LAN card, a BACnet card. Could be any of those underneath the graphics. I don't really care. I'm just trying to get information, right? And make that stuff work. Colors are important.
Did you talk about how to save it? You push the edit to save, or you?
When you're on a graphic page, yeah. One thing to be careful with, if I'm on a graphic looking at a VAV, and I go into the edit page to kind of look at a point. If I accidentally drug this thing and I hit this button, it would then automatically save that mess up that I did. Okay? So you don't want to exit that way if you've made changes by mistake. Go to something else, right? So if I double clicked on this again, it'll give me an option, hey, do you want to change this? And I can say no, and then it won't save those features. But if you hit the edit pad, if you toggle this one, it'll save without asking. So that can be an important piece. Okay? Alright. No questions?
Doesn't it also depend on the level of login that we have too, as to whether
most
things
of us
can be
get-
moved or changed around or something like that?
Whether or not,
Whether you can
There
edit
are
or not.
some limitations on, so each user has rights of what you can manipulate.
Okay.
If you can get this edit tab to move like that, then
Then you
you
have
have rights to mess things up. Okay? The other feature is if you're gonna play like I'm playing, right, in a box, most of the time you won't break anything, but before you start playing, make somebody do a backup of that control box. So you have
most
a
of these guys
database.
only have the HTML access.
So they can only see the front stuff anyway.
Yep.
But if you're playing under the hood or editing graphics, that kind of stuff, always start out with a nice backup so you have something to fall back on if you got really excited and pushed the wrong button and deleted things, right? So But that's all the good stuff, so.